Came here for a holiday and never been back.
The first question is, who can New Zealanders go to for assistance in China? What kind of places and networks can you get safe information? And if we start with you, Ashley, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there are a myriad of opportunities and places where you can go to get assistance, ranging from professional service providers, lawyers, accountants, management consultants, financial consultants, through to various trade organisations, chambers of commerce, and all of them provide different levels of assistance and different levels of information. In terms of safe information, I think that's a very tricky thing in China. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of people who profess to have information. There's a lot of Mr. Fix-Its out there who claim to be able to facilitate deals and solve problems when, in fact, actually in my experience, they tend to create more problems than they solve. And so I think the word safe is one that needs to be used advisedly. It's very important, I think, in China to do as much diligence as you can from as many different sources as you can to try and accurately test the information and ensure that it's really what you're looking for.
I think one thing that I've found living in China and previously in Hong Kong and even around Asia, that people are really very willing to help, and I'm not sure how that compares to other countries, but I think that really, because it is such a foreign place, I think people really, if they are approached, really do.
I think that's very true, and I think the communities do pull together. There's a strong New Zealand community in China, there's a very strong Australian community in China, and they do go out of their way to help fellow nationals, and I think that's a very good source of information at the first instance. It may be limited to some extent because you may be looking at specific projects or specific industries, but certainly they can point you in the right direction, for sure.
What about you, Nick?
I think one of the best things to do is when you first come into China is to really find people who've been in the market a while, basically invite them out for a lunch or a beer and just really try and pick their brains and find out what are some of the pitfalls, what are some of the things that they need to pay attention to. I think one point that Ashley made, which I totally agree with, is you have to be very cautious about people who claim to have inside information or someone who can help you achieve something without necessarily following the letter of the law or anything like that, because so many people have found out the hard way that in fact what appear to be shortcuts actually can end up taking them on a very long and circuitous journey indeed. And I think another point is if you're looking at setting up a business here, then I think the issue of doing due diligence is critically important, and I would say you should not lower your standards one jot in China when thinking about setting up a business here. So I think you need to balance how much time you're willing to invest in learning about China, because you could spend your life here and not necessarily know everything there is to know about the country, and balancing that against the decision of now's the time for me to make a decision and maybe think about investing in here or setting up an operation. So I think it depends what your goal is.
And Jade, what about you? What would you advise for New Zealanders?
For me, the number one resource is definitely people who've done it, and that involves a lot of networking. Getting to events, mixing with amongst certain crowds which are involved in the industry. Secondly, I think one definitely for myself is locals, and they're a huge, the ultimate resource of information. The problem then is defining, the second part of the question, which is that good information, because that then takes experience. So if you have the experience to define is this advice that's going to help me or hurt me, then you need to find somebody who can not necessarily understand what they're talking about, but they can understand the nature of the information.
What could be considered a good reason or rationale for setting up or getting involved with China in a commercial venture?
What could be a good reason? Well, I mean, I think the obvious answer to that is that there's a business opportunity here for you. And you don't always have to spend a fortune to try out something here. Many entrepreneurs have come here and really set up businesses out of a briefcase, basically, and the risk to them may be relatively modest. So I think you have to be very sanguine about doing business here, And we've already discussed the issue of doing due diligence, and I think that's critically important. Whenever you're considering business opportunities, never forget to do your homework properly and really, investigate what you're trying to achieve here.
I think maybe the fact for people who have an adventurous spirit, it really does feel here that you are part of history in the making, and you're part of some sort of new frontier that hasn't really been explored very much. I mean, it's really so recently that China's opened, and I think that the sort of challenge of working somewhere just that's so utterly foreign as well, but somewhere that does welcome you, and somewhere where you really have a lot of potential if you happen to get hooked into the right thing. Would you agree with that, Jay? What do you think?
I'm probably a classic case of that. Came here for a holiday and never been back, so I agree wholeheartedly with Nick. I think we're on the same wavelength in the sense that to us it's a bit of a no-brainer in terms of our geographical location, in terms of China's aspiration and their history in the world in terms of economy. They feel they're coming back to their rightful place in society and global society now. So for myself, it's not such a matter of why would you come, it's a matter of when will you come, under what terms you'll come, and how much exposure you're willing to come with. And I think that's a key point for me, is the exposure. I don't think, and as Nick said, you can come in various stages. You could come in through just over some internet presence, very low risk, maybe get a few orders from China, sourcing and whatnot, or you could set up shop here and move your family here. There's all the options you have. But reasons to get involved more specifically, one would be obviously opportunity, but also threats. There's huge threats to a lot of New Zealand markets from China that, whether you like it or not, you better wake up and sort out your situation, because a lot of these markets are going to come whether you like it or not. And look at it as an opportunity. It's not a threat. It's like, great, we've got this. We've been forced to kind of get ahead of the times, but look what that brings with it. And whether it's tourism, okay, start getting into Chinese tourism. It's going to happen. Start looking at if you're manufacturing New Zealand, obviously you need to look at, is it a product which they can manufacture in Asia or in China specifically? Okay, look at somehow linking up, or partnerships. Doesn't mean you have to move offshore, but definitely linking partnerships so you do have that option if that time does come. And I think a lot of it is really about analysing threats as much as opportunity.
And Ashley, what about you in terms of what you would consider a good reason or rationale for setting up and getting involved in China in a commercial venture?
I think that Jade and Nick have both touched on the fact that this is a massive market, and clearly there are many foreign companies here that are here to try and exploit that market. Equally, there are many foreign companies here that are purely looking to use China as a manufacturing base to export. I think you'll find that a great proportion, or certainly a high percentage, of China's exports that are complained about in the West, that they're flooding the markets, are actually exports produced by foreign companies in China. And so that's an area that a lot of people come to China, not necessarily for the China market, but for the ability to tap into the logistics networks, the low-cost labour force, and the increasingly skilled labour force. But I think the foreign companies that came in early looked at that as the business model. I think they're now looking towards China market itself, the internal market, which, as we've said, is just immense and growing every day. The middle class in China is expanding dramatically. The per capita incomes of Chinese is growing at a tremendous pace. They are becoming more able to spend and consume. So I think there are a lot of reasons to be here, as well as the market itself.
China's modernised at a huge rate, unlike has been seen anywhere in the world for such a long time. What kind of impact has this modernisation had in terms of family life, the environment, workplace, and the way people deal with foreigners?
I think the key is that China hasn't changed. Nothing's changed, and very tangible things have changed. But the Chinese culture, I believe, is still very similar to what it probably always has been. Very inventive, very willing, very, dare I say, capitalistic, have a great entrepreneurial spirit. As we know, the history has been pretty rough in modern history, and I think they just want to get back to some normality. It's not about they want to be millionaires, they want to be great scholars, or sure, there's those ambitions, and probably more now in the younger generation, because they've grown up with this great foundation. They've had an apartment, they've had schooling and whatnot, and now they're starting to reach towards things maybe kids in New Zealand that dream of, to be a great musician or to be a great sportsman, or which are luxury thoughts. Typically, if you look at modern history of China. Another issue is the environment is definitely a soft spot of mine. There's a huge impact on the environment, and they're aware of it. The government, as other people, are slowly becoming aware of it. I think the big fear is that too little, too late. But I think that's a global phenomenon. I don't think it's a China phenomenon. It's just been amplified because of the strain on resources in China and the size of the population. And I'll just say from mindset, China is a lot more, from what I've seen in the limited time I've been here, a lot more open-minded now to various concepts. And I think, again, it's generation gap, but whether it be with the internet, the huge revolution going on the internet in China, whether it's the mobile phone revolutions, there's just a massive willingness to take on new concepts.
People do feel that life will get better, and there is a chance for life to get better, and it's part of what you say, the energy and the excitement of change, and it's really quite an amazing thing to watch.
There's a huge hunger in this country for knowledge, for improving yourself. I remember when I first came to Beijing, I lived in an apartment 5 minutes walk from my office, and almost every morning someone would come up to me as I walked that 5-minute walk and ask to speak English to me. They didn't want to sell me anything, they just wanted to talk English, and that would never happen in New York or any other major city. That incredible thirst to improve yourself and work your way up the ladder, so to speak. Obviously that comes at a price, and I think the environment is a huge issue here. But I also don't think China's doing anything differently to what the West has done. They're industrializing, and they are, as the United States and Europe did, they're going to pay for it later. Now, of course, it may be too late for China and for the planet, because great parts of China now are just desert. The question is, can the provinces, can the local governments engage and enforce what is, in reality, actually very stringent environmental standards? It's the economic cost of development against the environmental cost, and that's a big problem, I think, and that's not going to go away soon.
Nick, you've been here for 18 years, which is almost enough time to see all of China's recent changes. What are your observations in terms of the impact that this modernisation has had on China, on the people, on families, and on the environment?
I think young people they have amazing opportunities here, and they have a cornucopia of opportunity. They have access to more information than their parents ever had or could dream of. In some ways, they're also rather lost, I find. They're not really sure necessarily what they want above and beyond material gain and material possessions. And when you sort of start talking to them about what do you really want out of life, and what's your long-term goal, then discussions can get quite interesting, because they may not have really thought about that. And I think what we're beginning to see is, with the emergence of so-called civil society, NGOs, organisations, people are really thirsting for something that gives them some extra meaning in their life. So organisations that help people look after orphans, elderly people, do something related to the environment, anything. I mean, I know lots of people who are beginning to think about getting active because they just want to find some purpose above and beyond just the pursuit of wealth.
Good note to end on. Thank you very much, all of you.